Leadership is taking people on a journey where there's a vision, guidance and purpose.
Good leaders lead with the heart as well as the head.
Leadership means doing the right thing for the right reason, no matter how difficult it might be.
You're listening to Leadership Unwrapped, a podcast where you will hear from people who are living leadership every day. Our next guest is Dr. Teresa Shiels. Teresa experienced a traumatic brain injury as a result of a car accident several years ago, but she's not let her hold it back. Teresa's gone on to do a degree, a master's and a PhD. She's a keen proponent for supporting those for inclusion, especially those with disabilities. She understands traumatic brain injury because she lives it every day. She's got a unique take on inclusion in higher education, a fantastic sense of humour, and always driven to be the best that she can and to support others to be the same. So we're absolutely delighted to welcome you here today, Teresa, and thank you for saying yes that you chat to us for our podcast.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So we might start by telling our listeners your journey. What happened to you?
Well, at the age of 19, in 2002, I sustained a severe traumatic brain injury as a result of a car crash, and I was in a coma for over 2 weeks. And as a result, I had physical, cognitive challenges which were immense.
Yeah.
And I spent 8 months in hospital before I could return home, and that actually was the start of more rehabilitation. It wasn't the case where I came home and I was fixed. It was only the beginning of my true rehabilitation.
Okay.
In the community.
So when you came out of the coma after the accident, what were you able to do, or where did you start from then? Can you just give the listeners a sense of that, I suppose?
When I came out from the coma, see, I can't actually remember that time, but I had no movement at all and could only move my eyes. Because I can remember a time when my brother brought in my newborn nephew, and I could only move. I couldn't even hold him.
Yeah.
I could only move my eyes, and I had no self-awareness at all. So.
Yeah. And so you started the journey of rehab was probably from that moment then, I take it.
Yes, I was actually doing rehab while, even though I wasn't self-aware, I was in the rehabilitation centre a month after that.
Okay. And what was rehab? What happens for rehab for those that aren't familiar with it?
Well, it's hard to explain, but they actually try to get you to become more independent and to be able to do everyday things for yourself. They got me to I know this may seem very everyday to some people, but it has to be said that people with TBI, as severe as I had it, I had to be taught how to dress themselves and shower. So it was kind of it was good to be able to engage in that sort of activities, to be able to participate and get where I am today.
Yeah. I think people who don't know a lot about TBI or about that rehab part don't get that you're starting from scratch again, and you're learning to walk, and you're learning to even your vision to get your vision back, to be able to see properly and learn to balance, shower for yourself, look after all of that. I think those that experience it know it, and I know we know it in my family too, but it just takes huge determination to do that. So, yeah.
And do you have a full memory of that time from rehab from the beginning, or?
Well, I actually do, but I was in the hospital before I was transferred to the rehabilitation centre in Dunleary. So that month before in hospital, I really don't have much memory from that time. But up in Dunleary, I have. And we used to take part in the occupational therapy and executive training group, where we had to relearn how to do memory tasks and planning and organising. And it was a kind of group of us trying to see could we regain those skills. And that helped me a lot to relearn those basic aspects of life. But of course I had a real tendency to laugh during my rehabilitation. So, and it's not that I wasn't aware that I was badly injured, it's just I couldn't help laugh because it's better than crying, you know.
So they say.
Yeah.
You have, those of us that know you know that you have real determination in spades and really a positive way of looking at life, and the laughing you have kept, most definitely. We certainly know that about you. So where does it come from? Where does that just sheer courage and determination come from?
My mother and my family, because I was relearning to drive an adapter car, as you do, and I was going on a particular stretch of road, and I could feel the fear taking hold, and I rang my mother and said I can't do it, and she was proud of herself with her psychology degree, and she said to me, now, I'm quoting Susan Jeffers, and feel the fear and do it anyway. And I was here, fine. So I was just reflecting on those words. I was thinking, well, if I do it once, I'll do it automatically after that. So I got over the bridge and I rang her in tears, and I was like, I did it. I couldn't believe it. But so that's the little things that make a person's life meaningful after TBI.
I think one of the things I've learned about TBI from my mum's journey, which has also been really hard, is just how more prevalent it is than we realise. It's way more common than we realise. And it's, I know you talked about this with me before, but it's almost the invisible piece that we need to make more visible so that we can really help and adapt a bit better so that access, not just for study, but for life, for shops, for living, for everything, is easier.
Yeah. Because I found that the cognitive pieces, the cognitive outcomes of TBI for me were so devastating, and I felt like I couldn't even go into a shop because that was preventing me from picking out what I wanted, asking the shopkeeper if I needed something else, and to be able to adapt to the situation and to be able to change my mind of what I wanted. And that actually got better over time, but it reared its ugly head again when I entered third level education, because those are the types of skills that are needed for undergoing study. And the attention and the concentration needed to engage with the material has to be fine-tuned.
Yeah, I think sometimes people don't see or overlook those challenges. Like, as you said, Patricia, if you're not familiar with someone with a traumatic brain injury and you haven't experienced it, it's I think people think about the physical a lot more than the cognitive.
It's because if you go see someone with traumatic brain injury, you're thinking you see the wheelchair, or they may have some limp, or and you were thinking, oh, that's easy to fix, but that's not the only challenge they face. So.
I remember my mother's journey. My mum had a stroke, but she had an AVM, but and after it, the first stage of the hospital recovery before she had her surgery, she was using this a square with pins for coordination, for pincer movement. You probably know this, and so she would spend hours every day just picking up the pin and putting it into the hole so that you were doing your hand-eye coordination, because of the tremor that she had, and she got really good at it within the however long she was there, and it was a long time. And then when she went in for her surgery, she lost all of that. It was gone, and she was back to square one. And she immediately picked up the pins and started again. And I remember being so moved by the determination of it and the courage of it, and I'm thinking, would I have that if it happened to me? And you're kind of the same, I think,
No, but it's just that you learn to do a thing, and your, say, the ability to move an object, and you do that again and again, and suddenly a different context, it could be a different room or something,
and it's gone.
And you're like, okay, I'll have to adapt to this room now. So that it just takes enormous time and courage.
Yeah.
And can I ask then, moving on to the third level education, so you said a lot of things within third level don't align with the challenges, say, of someone with TBI, and that can be very difficult. So what kept you motivated, and what pushed you to keep going through that? Because obviously we're sitting here now with Dr. Shiels in front of us, so you've obviously done very well for yourself. And what kept you motivated, and what inspired you to do that?
Well, before my accident, I was actually a student in third level, and I wanted to return to some sort of normality. But as you know, I only realised after a time that I couldn't return to normality as I knew it. But that's okay, because it just is. I had to accept that. But so returning to third level gave me a sense of meaning in my life, and it brought me back into society where I could participate and find that I was flourishing in the little things, and that's gave me a motivation to keep going, because once I could flourish at the small things, other people may not have known, but that was what was motivating me, was the little positivity I found in the small things.
So over the years, I mean, we've talked a lot over the years, and I think it's okay to say that not everybody felt you could achieve this. I think you got lots of messages after you sustained the TBI that your education journey was over, and you've told me that a few times, but you certainly didn't accept that now. So what's it like to have that coming at you, though people's assumptions to say you've sustained a TBI now, so stay within the limitations of that, and you refusing to do that, obviously. What was that like?
It was very devastating for myself self-esteem and for any development of my identity as a person with TBI, because I remember going into a medical profession for an examination and assessment, and being in the lift for the assessment, and being in the lift with the professional and my mother, and I was there with my walking frame, and the professional turned to my mother and she said, "How is she now?" And I was like, "Oh my God, she is fine."
Good for you.
That was kind of getting across my annoyance at her looking past me, and that I was a person and that I could make my own decisions and an autonomous individual.
But you haven't let it hold you back. So, I mean, it can't have been easy to go to to do the degree when you went to college and were contending with the outcomes of the TBI, and you've talked about that, the concentration, but also the fatigue, the intense fatigue that it brings that people don't understand, I think, until you know somebody who's living with it, and getting around a building. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Oh, how many times have I fallen? I thought I had gotten over my little balance issues, and I've fallen down steps and everything, but I thought I had gotten over all of those issues, and then I would be contending with the fatigue as well. So that was extremely difficult. And then also, you see, there's so many challenges I face, and you need resilience to overcome all of these, so that you can face people who may have the wrong assumptions of you because you may fall down steps, or that physical ability does not equate to cognitive or intellectual capacity. So,
can I say, without making too light of it, you fall very gracefully, I must say. Because we were together once when it happened, and I'm calling you the starfish because you went down so gracefully. You know it, but and I'm not making fun too much, really, but. And it was simply because, and I'm always struck by this, the alignment of the lift just was the tiniest bit out, and it affects your balance, and you could fall that easily. So these things are really important, but we unless you live with that or know that, we just don't think about it for somebody.
Because at the beginning of college, I was trying to be, I can do what everyone else is doing. So I said, I'll go down the traditional steps and the winding staircase. And as I went down, I missed the last 4 steps.
4? Oh God.
So I got up and there was nothing wrong with me. But it's difficult because you have people's misperceptions of you, but sometimes they can be right that you do get fatigued, and you have to accept them and make them aware that you just need to be understood, and you need more time to take into account of the fatigue, the cognitive delay, and sometimes you need to be accept that you have TBI and that you have challenges. So you have to accept, and then you make other people aware of those difficulties, and they will support you and help you.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think there's a big, there's a grieving for losing the who you are before, you know, and the changes that come with that. The acceptance, I think, comes. It's hard won. Is what I'm trying to say. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. I don't think you ever truly accept the full changes that occur. You accept the situation, and that's how you deal with it and cope. That you accept your identity as a person with TBI, but you must know that these can change with each setting. So you have to be able to adjust, and that is one of the things that is very hard for a person with TBI, to be able to adjust to each different setting and make the most of it and flourish and disclose that you're having trouble or having difficulty, so you can get the support.
It's really hard to do if you're one of 300 in a room where you need to go to a lecturer, you know, or you need to, you know, to say to somebody. It's hard to do it, I think.
Yeah, it takes persistence and courage.
Yeah.
But the disability support services do actually give you an opportunity to disclose, but it's up to the discretion of that particular teacher or lecturer to allow accommodations.
Yeah.
Because the policy in the university doesn't recognise neurodiversity and students with TBI as they wouldn't really recognise that disability.
Yeah, that it's an additional challenge that it can be invisible as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
They wouldn't recognise that the annual progressions.
Yeah.
They wouldn't recognise the cognitive delays that occur in such anxious, stressful environments as those examinations.
Yeah. So for our listeners, what we're talking about is an oral exam. We're talking about is a where you go in for about an hour and you have a panel of 2 or 3 people and they're questioning you, and in that sort of, you know, argumentative, I mean that word positively, but a kind of a questioning and a pushing in terms of your idea space.
You're supposed to answer on the spot.
Yeah, and for somebody with TBI, that's but that's the thing that we're only catching up on. So, and that's not good enough. I just need to say that. But so we are still at the stage in inclusion where we're talking about adapting the system to help people who are coming in, instead of, you know, inclusion proofing it at the beginning to make sure that it's not adapting we're doing, it's that it's diverse enough to include everybody.
Yeah.
We have a bit of work to do there, because I still feel that when we're just adapting to let somebody in, there's still a power dynamic, and it's harder. It's then on your personal resilience and your toughness to get through that stuff.
Because I had to adapt to the learning environment. It's often ableist and
very much so, and that's what I've learned even from our friendship is the assumptions that you can think you're as inclusive and but you may not be, and you just don't even know that about yourself until you come up against the piece where you realise this isn't working for somebody else. And so that, I think for me, the piece where I feel like we're just moving the deck chairs around the Titanic a little bit when we're kind of saying, oh, let's just adapt here to fix this, instead of saying, let's look at the whole system and have a much more inclusive space, that it's not one way of examining and one way of, you know, assessing and one way of learning. That's the...
Yeah, I think we definitely have a long way to go, but do you think in your experience, have you seen things starting to improve yet? I know you've dedicated a lot of time and work into ensuring that people with TBI feel supported and feel visible, but do you feel like it's headed in the right direction, or do you think we're still...
Well, from my experience, I can only say it is heading in the right direction with the students being seen and respected and recognised as a person. And but I don't think that the whole system fully recognises each individual student. I was lucky that I had supervisors who are willing to listen to me and were open to what I had to say. So that was very beneficial to my inclusion.
Do you know what I think? It's a lottery. You can be lucky and get the right person who gets it. And if you're unlucky and you don't, then you've a bigger uphill climb. And I don't think that that's good enough. That's my take on it. Am I being too hard?
No, because like as Nell Nowding said, you have to make a student feel seen and respected to promote the development of their learning and engagement with whatever topic and subject that they're learning.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think all supervisors are willing to go the extra mile and try and understand the student with TBI or any other difficulties.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at their own academic development.
But I also think, and this is one of the things that you've taught me, is, and my mum too, from her journey, but your assumptions are your assumptions. And so you work in this way because it's worked for so long.
Yeah.
But you're making these assumptions and they're not right sometimes. So, and I'm very struck and I'm struck by this piece for us, but I remember talking to you about reading a book at one point and you saying to me, you were assuming that I can hold the book. You were assuming that my vision is fine, that I can read the book, that I don't have this attention tremor that's going to stop me holding the book steady so I can read it. And we do make those assumptions and you have to just literally, and because we come from an ableist perspective, it just doesn't compute that your assumption is wrong until somebody teaches you that it's wrong.
And you can do that with the best intentions in the world.
Totally. And so that's been a real interesting learning. Do you know?
But it was my fault at the start that I didn't try and deconstruct those assumptions.
Yeah.
Because I was hiding them.
Yeah, but there's also the piece about wanting to be seen to do everything well, and you know, it's hard to just turn around and say, actually, you know, supervisor, you can't assume that, you know, which is really.
This is kind of the struggle that any student with TBI or any disability challenge does have, that debate within themselves, that if I do disclose, I might get the doctorate or that I want so much. Yeah. But and then if you don't have open communication about the challenges you face, you don't get the support you need.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I was offered access to a support worker as well to help me navigate the system in higher education. But that doesn't always help you, because sometimes you have to find your own way to navigate the system in third level.
Yeah. And I think especially when that's where you may see your journey in the future, it has to become a system that you navigate in your way for the best way that you can to create those opportunities in the future. So I think the invisibility piece makes it so much harder And just even things like assuming that with the fatigue and the concentration and everything, assuming that there's a time limit on learning, that you do your degree in this many years, or you do your master's in this many years, or, you know, we just need to unpack that way of thinking about it, because it doesn't. And if you don't complete them in a certain number of years, well, there's a cost to that. You have to pay more and more and more, you know. So it's an expensive endeavour if we don't really look at all of that, I think.
Yeah, but I suppose I had to accept that I was in that system, and that I had to take, because I was accepting my TBI, and that was it, and the challenges that came with that. So I was accepting the fact that I was going to take longer to do the PhD, but also I want to change that system and to be making more aware of the difficulties and the fatigue, which does affect the students' ability. Make the system more aware of TBI and their challenges, and hopefully they can adapt to that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So do you think, like, is awareness, Joe, when you talk about changing the system, is awareness your dream, we'll say, or is, like, what do you envisage as being kind of best case scenario?
A responsive
Fair enough.
academy.
Fair enough. Yeah.
No, I just think that if more students were treated with care and have their individuality recognised, then a student with TBI would have their personal traits recognised on the one hand, then treated with hope. It needs a hopeful outlook, so an ontological turn, say, and a rethinking of access for students with TBI, so that it's not just a one-size-fits-all understanding. It just takes in the whole holistic experience of the student, and hopefully the academy can be responsive to their needs.
Yeah, and that understanding of the individual can be across the board then. I mean, that's like, if that was happening, it would involve inclusion for everyone.
Because if you have a caring department or university, they will accommodate each student and be willing to change the system to meet their needs.
I'm always struck, I know we've talked about this before, but I'm always struck by the work of Martin Buber, who talks about, you know, you can treat as an I it. So it's you know, it's the group or it's the organisation. It's impersonal. It's an it. This is what we do and we just do it. Or you can really come into that I thou space where I see the person and I'm open to hearing what it is that person needs to flourish. And I create the space for them to hear what I need to flourish with them, because there's two in the dynamic, really. And I think the hopeful piece that you're talking about is the piece I hadn't added on to that. But you know, when you talk about being told, you know, that your education journey was over, you never lost that hope. You kept going, and you talk a lot about your family being there to help you keep that. You never lost that.
No.
Which is amazing.
But no, because you do hope. You do have to have that hope that you can achieve what you need to. So that's, I think, you're talking about distributive approaches and in your paper. And I think that that kind of approach, it would be great for someone with TBI, and not just being placing the responsibility for a student with TBI's success on one individual, rather place it on several different departments and people for that person's success.
Yeah, it becomes the setting then, doesn't
and
it?
the ethos, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It becomes a way of being. Like you talk about that ontological piece, it becomes a way of, that we expect that way of being in how we work. I think that's really important. Can I ask you about a paper you published about incivility for neurodiverse students? So what were you saying in that?
I was just saying that it was the power dynamics in the institution that often caused me to go into myself and not engage fully with the higher education system, because the discourses often can play an awful part in the participation of students with TBI and my participation.
Yeah. I think in that paper you talk about how the system itself can be uncivil, you know, and how we internalise that, and just how challenging it is to deal with that while you're still trying to get through your studies and do your stuff. So we might put the link of that into the blurb around when we put this on the website, if that's okay with you, because I think people should check it out. I think it's really good.
Totally okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the power dynamic is huge. Like I think, particularly before it, kind of returning to what we were saying, but that challenge of disclosing challenges versus not disclosing them, and that internal battle, like the power dynamic within the institution, I would imagine is a big factor there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some people, that's where care actually deconstructs that power dynamic and makes it more relational, and that is the I thou,
Yeah, absolutely.
Buber's I thou
Yeah.
interaction that breaks down that power, that power piece where the student is actually, their needs come to the forefront of the interaction, and they can disclose their needs, and they are hopefully met.
Because I think still that there's still a power dynamic in having to disclose. It's not, you know, okay, you can choose not to, but when you choose not to, you're letting go of accessing some supports. It's not naturally there, and I'd love us to remove the need to do that, because it was the support was naturally there, you know, because, you know, with a disability especially, you do have to disclose to get what you need. Whereas if you had if something else, say for example, I had migraines for a long time, I mightn't necessarily have to disclose that, but something like this, to get what you need, you do. And that's not always a choice if the cost is going to be your success. And I'd like a system that wasn't needed anymore.
Yeah.
That would be my thing.
It shouldn't
That's
be,
my hope.
It shouldn't be on the individual.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Thanks. I kind of went a long way around trying to say that. Thanks, Leo.
But no, I think we want to create an environment that people can be their authentic selves. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so excuse me for my fatigue.
You're okay.
I'm a speech.
Do you, I know this is an awful question to ask somebody, but do you think your story inspires other people?
Well, I hope it does. Well, it gives them hope that anything can be overcome.
Yeah.
With even say when I was at my very worst, I kept on to hope, because my mother, sorry if I'm bringing her in.
No, I think she's a fine woman.
But my mother said to me when I said to her, my dream of getting back playing soccer, and she said, well, because I was in a wheelchair at that stage, so, and she goes, well, aim for that and get as far as you can. And if you fall below that, that doesn't matter. At least you know you've tried your best. So I've held on to that.
I love that. I love that. It reminds me of that saying, what is it? Aim for the moon and you land among the stars.
Yeah.
It's that kind of real hope, you know. You've said before when we've chatted about, you know, when you come out of rehab and you're back in your community, you're kind of left a bit. The services are much harder to access. So family is huge. And I think in your story that's the case.
My family was a great support, but also the community, because they supported my recovery immensely, and I only went to physio because of their support.
Yeah. So that's really important. I think that people understand just how much families and communities support those, because my mum's journey is the same, and there was an amazing community support. A lady championed that, Susan Ford was her name, and that gave her back a capacity to be independent, which is incredible. You know, really helped that, and family. I think family is everything.
Because my family had to do everything for me at one stage, and they never stopped motivating me to go further and try and do it for myself and get more independent. Even when there seemed to be no hope for me, like, they would just say, well, you know, keep going anyway and just try and do it and look, see what happens. And luckily it turned out well.
I have a sense they're not finished in motivating you somehow.
No.
I think they see more in the future for you.
No, they're not, but I'm not finished either.
So what's next? I mean, you're I know you met the minister recently, so we're in excellent company here with people who are hanging out with the minister. So what was that meeting about?
Well, it was more about awareness campaigns and about teacher training and supervisor training to have awareness amongst others, and
it's brilliant.
To be more inclusive to people with disabilities and bring about policy change in these institutions. So
I think
I give my input on it.
I think it's really important to do it. I think the work that you're trying to do, and I think the work that Vivian Rath is championing and Professor Shelvlin to build that awareness, I think we're getting a groundswell now, and I think it's time to capitalise on that and get the voices out there. There's a risk in the current climate that other important discourses or debates that are going on around inclusion could make the disabilities piece a little bit more invisible. So we really need the voice out there. I think it's important.
Currently, the neoliberalist ideology in third level puts an emphasis on outputs and economic driven, market driven output. So disability is seen as a kind of an afterthought, and there wouldn't be the challenges as a result of a disability wouldn't be given the limelight or wouldn't be taken into account. Accommodations will be seen as very risky, very challenging for institutions, having to place money towards that, and they would say, well, couldn't we place funding or towards something that would be better, possibly someone that market that publishes more and so forth.
So what do what can we look forward to? What's Dr. Shiels going to do next, do we think? Is there a bit of writing on the cards?
Well, I'd love, hopefully I'll be doing a book and a few more papers. A book on how to overcome these challenges.
Be great.
And hopefully that'll help every individual to overcome this disability and possibly a good long break.
Bit of a rest, which is fair enough too. Yeah, I'd really look forward to that. I think there are far more people who sustain TBIs on a yearly basis than we hear, and your research has said that. I mean, you've made that really clear, and there's so many out there that need these stories, especially when it happens first, when you feel what's going to happen next, and you see. I know when my mother experienced her outcomes, I was teaching, and there was a gentleman in my class who you met subsequently who had come back as a mature student. I hope he's listening to this now, but when he came back as a mature student, and he came to meet me to disclose actually that he had a TBI and that he needed support, and this was 2 weeks into what had happened to my mum, and I remember just being caught in my breathing because it was so raw, and I just said, let's just sit and have tea. We went to the library in UL and we sat in the library coffee shop, and I talked about, which is unusual for the teacher to be with the student, and he he said, will I come and meet her? Would you like me to talk to her? Would you like her to see that there is potential and possibility? This was before I met you, and I remember thinking how amazing that was, and going straight down to tell her all about this and to see that there was a lot more to come.
Yeah, because even if I just give some hope to other students with TBI who may have encountered the same assumptions that I encountered prior to going to third level, and telling me that I couldn't achieve third level education, and doing a PLC course may be better. That kind of assumptions or discourses were not very positive, but they motivated me nonetheless.
Yeah.
And on that note, what advice would you give to someone that's grappling with TBI?
Persistence,
and
just to look on the the positive aspects of life, because whatever you find difficult, you have to repeat it over and over again until you get what the outcome you deserve and want.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I think you're the queen of persistence. There ain't nobody I have met that has your persistence, which I think is absolutely amazing. And you're right. You have to over and over, because the brain needs to figure out that this is the rewire to figure out that this is. But you don't just give hope to students or to people who've sustained the TBI themselves. You give hope to those of us who are around that, who inside them are so sad to see the challenges of the people they love, and then they meet people like you and people like the student that I met, and you give us hope. So there's a much wider ripple in the hope that you generate. I just think I need to tell you that, because it's true.
Thank you. I hope that I do.
I look forward to, we've worked together, and I think our listeners will have picked that up, and I look forward to continuing that work and pushing these boundaries and feeling like we can make a difference in this space. So I feel really privileged that you decided to co-opt me and make me do what I needed to do. So I'm grateful for that.
I'd like to just thank you very much for all the support. And I'm looking at you, Neve, too. But
not at all. It was you took me under your wing when I started the PhD in UL. So thank you.
Kind of a set for selfish reasons.
Not at all.
So we might draw to a close for now, but we'll probably talk to you again, I think, when your next work comes out. Thank you for taking the time and for giving us hope, and hopefully for our listeners too.
More than welcome. I hope I came across well.
Yeah, I've no doubt, no doubt. And I'm going to finish by saying to our listeners, you know, things are quite hard at the moment and people are finding it tough. Lots of people are tired, but most people are really doing their best. So if you can say something nice or something kind, either to your leader or to your colleague, and just give them a small bit of hope, just a chink, it's worth doing it today. So keep that in mind, and thank you for your time.